Operation Tomodachi is a great statement of Japan-American friendship. Thank you for your noble mission in Japan. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Captain Vitton and Captain Vengrow.
I have a little presentation. I wanted to kind of bring up some of the Navy aspects of what we do and why we're here. We are actually a reserve unit in Fort Worth, former Carswell Air Force Base. We have 269 billets in our unit. We probably have 40 to 50 sailors and officers that are in Iraq and in Afghanistan currently. So we do most of our missions with about 170 people. As you can see, this is the Pac Fleet mission. The mission is Admiral Walsh's, which is our 4-star admiral in Hawaii. And you can see that it's building partnerships through allies around the Pacific. And I want to show you the next slide. We were recalled from Singapore to get on the ship and ask how many people can stay. And we had 30 volunteers that were to stay out of a possible 60. They asked for 7 of us that had command and control experience as well as the doctor, so that we could bring that level of effort and establish what Tomodachi is, because there was nothing ever that has ever been brought up in the United States or the world as far as this type of a disaster this quick. In 2004, we had the tsunami that happened in Thailand, and we reacted to that with both the carrier and USS Blue Ridge. So this is something that we have had a lot of effort and built a lot of expertise in. My job was to set up the command and control for 7th Fleet, and continue on with this. But we were sailing down from as quick as we possibly could from Singapore up, and we were going to go to Tokyo and actually do a NEO operation, evacuation operation, if needed, because of the nuclear fallout that was going on with the reactors. But we were doing planning that we had the Reagan strike group was transiting across, just so happened at the right time that they were going to India to do an exercise with India Joint Forces. They were diverted to go to Tokyo. This is where I'm going to introduce Mike, and Mike's going to talk about the medical part and the radiation.
That's a Geiger counter. The Navy spent a lot of money training me to do a lot of things, which I have done for the Navy, but not this time. This is the first time in our history as the United States Navy, in conjunction with Japan, that we have done humanitarian assistance in a radioactive environment. We've never done this before, ever. And there's a lot to be learned from what we did do, what we didn't do, that we'll be learning for years. Because God forbid this should happen again and we're unprepared. So for me, normally someone asked me earlier that my contribution is usually taking care of people. Not this time. This time I'm on a staff with the Admiral, and 3 things happened in one day. Japan got hit by a huge earthquake. Then they got a tsunami. Isn't that enough? And then all of a sudden, there's this explosion of hydrogen gases, which according to my submarine educators, because they're very good at radiation physics, that should have been vented, but it was actually leakage. And as of yesterday, we now know that we were right, that those reactors melted down that first day. In any case, that's how we treated this exercise, is as if they did melt down. But that's my job. My job is to protect and do force health protection for the fleet, for anybody associated with the fleet, in a joint maritime environment with the Japanese Navy and our other allies as well. So radioactivity became something that I slept with, thought with, and worked with. And you must understand what we're doing. We're on a ship called the USS Blue Ridge. And I encourage you to Google it, because there's not much about it. But you will see on the first day, on March 11th, in Singapore, where they were loading pallets. I think it was like 274 of these pallets that were being loaded by the sailors. Humanitarian assistance for 2,500 people, to include food, water, clothing, whatever they need, except diapers, for 3 days. We had 274 of those we put on that ship. Before we started to steam that afternoon, we steamed north toward Japan. But right from that day, we were able to control all 19 ships we had, all 146 aircraft, all the helicopters off the Essex, which was our job and the line's job. But for me, it was an introduction to something I had never seen before, and that was a radioactive plume, which I thought they were kidding me because it sounded like a French word. But it wasn't. And that plume was going out from Fukushima. And CNN was quite helpful, because in Japan, NHK and CNN were actually showing more than anywhere else that I could get my hands on. So the exercise then became, for me, that evening, when we knew we were going to send helicopter crews in, what if they flew through that plume? What do we do? So the next question for me was, what's in it? So I had to learn, and the catch-up was quite abrasive and quick. The Admiral's a smart man. He asked very pointed answers. So I learned that radioactive iodine was in that cloud. I learned that cesium was in that cloud. And then later on, it was probably plutonium and uranium, but they were not of interest in the beginning. But those two were. How do you treat those? I didn't know. So radioactive iodine has to be treated with potassium iodide. But you have to give the potassium iodide before they're involved with a radioactive cloud. So think about that for a second. I guess this is I'll show you this picture. That's the deck of the Reagan. I'll take the hit for that. I made that mistake. I thought 100 nautical miles off of Sendai was enough for that ship to be. You realize that if shipping gets hit with radioactivity that's too intense, it's just a hunk of metal from then on, right? You can't use them anymore. That make sense? It's kind of like if an individual has too much radioactivity that they've absorbed, there's not much I can do at that point either. But why are they washing down the decks? And in the next slide, why the water? Doesn't radioactivity kind of go through things? It does. But the particulate matter that the radioactivity got from those explosions, it attaches itself to them. So that has a true value. And that can take away a lot of the radioactivity and dilute it, because that's what we do. We dilute it. Remember there was a big fear on the West Coast that the radioactivity was coming? But we knew that it was going to dilute out, that it wouldn't be of any clinical significance to people here. So the next thing we had to do was this. This is what should have been my exercise. That's a chemical plant in Japan that exploded, and it should have been debris, chemicals in the soil, in the ground, that people are exposed to, what they breathe, the things that I do for a living for the United States Navy, and how do we take care of those people with their respiratory illnesses, GI illnesses, and so forth. I did not expect an explosion in a nuclear power plant. Further, I didn't expect the other two explosions within the next couple of days. So this did not become the exercise, which is usually what we do in humanitarian assistance. These are the kind of things that we did in Haiti, for example, and then we have to find them shelter. But you know, Japan is a tier 1 country. I don't know if you know what that means, but Japan teaches a lot of the countries about humanitarian assistance. The Self-Defense League lives for earthquakes and tsunamis. Not that they want them, but they have a tremendous amount of experience how to deal with them. They're very good at it. But not this time. No one expected those three things to come together. I think there was a movie once called The Perfect Storm. There was 3 different storms, and they all came together, and that's what happened here. And they were overwhelmed. Within 24 hours, they had 52 medical teams on the ground, boots on the ground, up north to help these folks. And normally, they would have said, thank you very much, 7th Fleet, we don't need your help. But they recognized, to their character, that this was just too big for any country. And they allowed us to help them. It was our privilege to do that, because I don't know how many of you know this, but in Yokosuka, which is the naval base, the forward naval base that we serve, there's about 40,000 Americans that live here. That's family of the people on those ships. So this is a very personal exercise. And here's a kid from Dallas who lives here, and I have to make decisions based on people who live there and their families that live there and protect them in terms of what do we do for them to protect them the best. Potassium iodide works by ingestion before you are hit with a plume or a cloud of potassium iodide or radioactive iodine. And what happens is your whole body gets the iodine. There's nothing I can do about that. But did you know your thyroid picks it up better than anything else? Those of you, generally women, who ever had thyroid problems, who got radioactive iodine from your physician, that's why. Because the thyroid picks it up. So if I give you a pill of potassium iodine, your thyroid will pick it up. and I'll load it up. And then when the radioactive iodine comes in, it'll be in your blood, but it has a half-life of 7 days. It'll go away. And I blocked it from getting into your thyroid, because if I don't block it, your thyroid will die, and so will you. Generally a slow infection. So we can prevent that.